So, welcome to the Old City Cemetery in Beaver Dam. Tonight we are doing Haunted History 15. This is our 15th year of doing Haunted History. And we have a beautiful warm night here in October, on October 4th.
Hi, thanks for stopping by. I'm Elizabeth Perry. It's easy to walk by my grave because I don't have a headstone. My husband is also here. His name is Eli Perry. He was a famous inventor. Have you ever heard of him? No? Well, let me tell you a little bit about Eli. He was born in New York in 1831, and he went through school to become a teacher, and he taught 2 years down in New Orleans, but because of his abolitionist views, he was not well received, so he came back to New York. His family then decided to move out to Wisconsin, so they landed in Burnett, and that's where I met and married Eli. And we lived with his folks until the outbreak of the Civil War. And it was at that time that Eli went with the Wisconsin 5th out east to fight the Confederates. And the Wisconsin 5th was involved in some fairly significant battles, like the Battle of Antietam, where they supported the artillery division. And it was a bloody Union victory, they say, and it enabled Lincoln to launch his Emancipation Proclamation. Eli was also at Gettysburg, and at Gettysburg, the Wisconsin 5th was held in reserve. They didn't get any action that day, which was probably good because Eli was very, very sick. He had dysentery, which comes from bad water. He was discharged, he came home, and he never really regained his strength. And Eli eventually did a lot of thinking and a lot of reading, and he decided to solve a problem that he had seen earlier when he was a young man, where he was watching some train cars hook up to each other. And train cars in the 1850s hooked up in a link and pin system where there was a link and someone had to stand in between and put a pin in. And he saw a man be crushed in that case. And many times men were crushed. And so he put together a new safety coupler that did not have a link and a pin, and it was a safety mechanism that probably saved thousands of lives over the next several years. And the link and pin went out of style in the 1870s, and I have to think that Eli had a lot to do with that.
Hey, what's going on here? Telling stories, I hear? Well, hey, I got a good one for you. I'm Bill Goody, and I was a builder here in Beaver Dam. Back in the day, William Farrington hired me to build a frame building on the south side of Front Street downtown. Well, Farrington had some pretty grandiose ideas. He wanted to build this building that was 3 stories high. Can you believe it? And yep, yeah, the top floor was going to be a public dance hall. So, well, you know, we built buildings a lot different back in the day, and so they were built, you know, 1 floor at a time, and that's kind of how they were constructed. That type of building back in the day was called balloon framing, and that. So we'd build the frame from sill to rafter, and got that all set up, and then we'd hang the floor off of that one, and we go to the next floor, and so on like that. But now remember, back when I was building, we didn't have cranes and lifts and all the things that you have today. We had ropes, pulleys, and just flat out manpower. But I got it all done, got all 3 stories up, and she was a beauty. Well, wouldn't you know it, the big storm come barreling across the lake, and a big gale wind blew everything down into a big mess. And guess what? And me underneath it. I was underneath that whole pile. And believe it or not, and everybody kind of thinks that, you know, this is probably why I was here, you know, why I'm here is from that, but actually not. And Farrington thought I was a goner too, basically. But after digging through 3 stories of lumber, they found me, found my body. I was alive and well, I was healthy, not a scratch on me. So, but the 3-story building finally did get built. Farrington had to build one, but he built it out of brick this time, and that is called the Concert Hall downtown, and that is the oldest building in Beaver Dam downtown.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Josiah Newell, and I have the dubious distinction amongst all these good folks here of having been lost at sea. It seems my gravestone has been lost too, But since I was not buried here, I guess it doesn't really matter. I was born in 1798 in Southington, Connecticut. I moved my family here in 1846 to Beaver Dam. I had quite a career as a builder and architect. I also was responsible for planting many of Beaver Dam's beautiful shade trees. I was an outspoken abolitionist, which means I was against slavery. So I was very proud of my son George when he joined the military and went to war for the North in the Civil War. 4 years had passed and I hadn't heard a word from him. So fearing the worst, I set out in search of him. I was out east looking for him when I jumped on the steamer ship, the Melville. The Melville was a steamer ship built in New Orleans in 1857, and it was primarily used as a blockade ship to help keep the South from getting their supplies. Now we were headed south towards Hilton Head, South Carolina. On January 8th, we came upon a great storm. And let me tell you, the seas were angry that day, my friends. There were 65 people on board the Melville, plus another 16 crew members. We all gathered buckets, coffee urns, and pots of any kind that would hold water to bail. It survived for a couple of hours, but at 11 o'clock it sank. In fact, it sank so fast that only 4 people made it onto the ships, onto the boats. 4 people survived. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of them. So, my obituary back here in Beaver Dam, they printed this poem. The sea, the lone blue sea hath won. He rests where pearls lie deep. He was loved of all, yet none over his lone bed may weep. I bid you adieu.
Hello, it's about time you guys got here because I needed help starting the fire and we need to sweep the... Oh, wait a minute. This isn't the schoolhouse, is it? No, that's... I keep forgetting. Let me introduce myself. My name is Miss Mabel E. Adams, and I am one of the first private school teachers in Beaver Dam. The first public school teacher is Adelaide Ladd, and she had a school in 1848. My school was located between Front Street and Maple Street and Spring Street on the east side. I hear there's a really tall building there right now where people can sleep. But anyway, I had a very good curriculum. We had arithmetic, history, geography, math, and of course we had reading. And guess what we read? The Bible. I would have one child with one verse, we would go to the next one, and the next one, and so on. And they became quite good readers. When they were done reading, then we would kneel down and say a prayer. And you know, there were some naughty ones in there too, but I kept track of them. You know what they say? Spare the rod, spoil the child. But now, well, I want to tell you a story about one person that came. There was a Mr. James Patch that came to our school one day. He sold books, came in the front door. He had me look at some books, I picked some out, and then I rejected some and he had to take those back with him. But instead of going out the front door, he decided to go out the back door. Well, we rarely ever use the back door because it's too high off the ground. Well, he opened the door with his back and he backed right off and fell. Oh, my goodness, the children were all upset about it. And it took a while to get them all settled down. But I think it took Mr. Patch a great deal longer to recover from that fall.
Good evening, folks. I'm Dan Howard. Welcome here. It's ironic that this is here because it's only a quick little distance away from where my tragedy occurred. There used to be a railroad that ran along here, and when that railroad went up by Monarch and Jackson Street, unfortunately I was killed by the railroad there. We had a rail. Yeah, this is it. That's why I said you should come later. But the railroad came into town originally in 1854, and it came by, and there used to be a station over there for freight. But then in 14 years later, it put a spur, and that railroad ran into town. But they wanted, and in order to make all the people that they wanted to serve, they made a big loop so it would come around. And if you can imagine, it should have a blackboard. It was a straight and then a big loop, and they called it the banjo. Oh, not the banjo, they called it. Sorry about this. Frying pan. Because I heard it's actually two places. Sometimes there's banjo and sometimes frying pan. But that frying pan, that originally went to the brand new station that's now our historical society. From there, it went to Phoenix Cheese Company, which is now Kraft. It went past, also went past the Western Malibu, which was the largest foundry in the area. At one time, they had 1,200 employees, and they also went by Kirsch, just all on that loop. Now, it was so busy that they went and we had a train coming through 8 times a day, and each time they would come into town, they'd leave town. So as they crossed streets, they would blow the horn. Now, we had some rich people up on the top of the hill by where what is now Park Street. They didn't like all that noise, so we actually didn't. Beaver Dam was one of the few places where it would hardly blow the horn at all. Now, it's interesting when you talk about the railroad. I don't know how many of you know where Leipzig is. You just go out Center Street, or I should say Spring Street, you run into Leipzig when it comes west. That is right now. That is one town or one bar on the corner. At one time, they had a population of over 300, and the only thing that you can really see is if you happen to take a canoe down the river, you can see the foundations for where a mill was. Now, they thought the railroad was going to come that way, and it didn't. And basically, the town died. People moved away from it. They came to Beaver Dam first because we had 3 mills, which were very, very active. So that's a little bit interesting as far as the history of the railroad. Now, I know I lived here until I died in '84, and I knew that it was trains well coming in and out, and so, but one late night in February, it was really cold, and I was bundled up. I had my scarf pulled up, my hat pulled down. I looked south to see if a train was coming, and there was no train coming. So I crossed those slippery train tracks, slipped and fell, heard a horn. That's the last thing I remember before the train ran over me. I guess that tells you should look both ways. And so that's my advice to you. And I'm glad to see you here tonight.
Beautiful evening, isn't it? Now, I'm Ann Mackey, and I'm sure no one has heard of me. It's my husband, Thomas Mackey, you all know. He was the first settler in Beaver Dam. But I'm telling you right now, he was not alone. Did he decide all in his lonesome that we should move to Wisconsin? Of course not. We heard from Tom's sister, Martha Brower, that her family of 10 had arrived safely in Fox Lake. And a year later, we too, with our daughter Hannah and her husband Joe, joined them there. The kids were excited for a new start. And while Joe was a hard worker, Thomas was the one with the skills to fell trees and construct a fine abode from them. He was so skilled at it that when Abram Ackerman first came to Beaver Dam, he hired Thomas to build his cabin. What Joe was able to put up was rather rough, and I took my husband Thomas to task for not helping his son-in-law more. After all, it was to be the home of our first grandchild, Johnny, born in 1840. Now, while the men were busy building, I was helping my daughter care for the new baby, growing a garden, helping Martha with the cooking, mending clothes, washing diapers, fishing, picking berries, and turning wheat into flour to make the best biscuits this side of Lake Michigan. I kept the livestock out of the corn, milked the cow, made butter, spun wool, put up food for the winter, wove cloth, and on and on and on. Now when Tom came in, he found a comfortable home, clean clothes, and a good hearty meal. Everything that had to be done back then was difficult. Tom and Joe decided to haul some corn to sell in Milwaukee back in 1839 in the spring. So they hooked up 3 oxen, and a wagon load of corn and headed out. They got as far as Watertown, where they met Mr. Dennis, who just arrived from Milwaukee, where he'd had to leave most of his furniture behind, the road being nearly impassable. Now Tom and Joe made a deal with Mr. Dennis, borrowed his wagon and oxen, put half their corn in his wagon, and continued on to Milwaukee, where they sold the corn and picked up Mr. Dennis's household goods. With 2 wagons and 5 oxen, they were able to get all the furniture to Watertown. Their round trip from Fox Lake to Milwaukee and back took them 11 days. Now don't you folks forget us women. We were the foundation of everything that the men accomplished. The first settlers were all of us Mackeys, not just Tom.
Tonight I am portraying the Baptist Reverend Dr. Elva Burgess. And I came to Beaver Dam in the early 1840s by way of New York. I was born in Chatham, New York, which is a little bit southeast of Albany, New York. And in the 1840s, before I came to Beaver Dam, I helped to found the Sons of Temperance. The Sons of Temperance, if you don't know what that is a fraternal order of men who are against drinking and abolishing alcohol in the United States. And in the early 1840s, after that, I came through the Erie Canal to Illinois, up through Milwaukee, and eventually over to Beaver Dam. I brought my wife with me, Lou Sally Warren, and once we were here in Beaver Dam, we had actually 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. I was the minister of the Baptist Church in Beaver Dam until 1850, and eventually I passed away in 1864, and are buried right over here by this torch right near the road right here. Now another interesting thing about me is I had a son who joined the Union Army Company D of the 5th Infantry of Wisconsin in 1862, and my son was wounded in action 5 times in 5 different battles, eventually surviving the war and dying in 1871, and he is also buried right here in the cemetery with me as well as the rest of my family. But I'm buried right over here by the street, so I always see what's going on every day when people are driving by in Beaver Dam. That's it, and I hope you enjoy the tour of Haunted History 15 this year.